In 2006, Shin Megami Tensei Persona 3 was first released for the PlayStation 2, and it set out to give this Shin Megami Tensei spin-off franchise more of a unique identity. Because as we all know, the Persona franchise started off as just a spin-off from the very popular JRPG series, Shin Megami Tensei. The SMT franchise had a lot of these spin-offs like Soul Hackers, Devil Summoner and many others. Of course, this included Persona. But Persona 3 wanted to go a step further and become something more than just another one of these spin-off series. And it did this by including an entirely new aspect which would take up around half of the game. Of course I'm talking about the slice of life or life sim gameplay. And it did this to great success. The world loved Persona 3 in its new direction, so much so that this new identity and direction became the core for Persona today. And they already stated in interviews that the future of the franchise will keep building on this base. After Persona 4, they would even drop the Shin Megami Tensei title and would simply be known as Persona. So while Persona 1 might have been the first Persona game, Persona 3 is really where this new era of Persona games started. Now it's 2022. We have Persona 4, 5, a bunch of spin-offs and re-releases, but I'm still here thinking about Persona 3, and I know I'm not alone in this. The game still has a really big fanbase, and almost every time Persona 3 or Persona in general is brought up, people will start talking about how we all want a remake of some sort, or even just a remaster or a definitive edition. Even now that we finally have an announcement for a current gen HD port to all platforms, people, including me, are still asking for a new Persona 3 version. And that is because Persona 3 is in a really unique situation within the franchise. Unlike Persona 1 and the Persona 2 duology, Atlus actually acknowledges its existence and is porting it to current gen. But unlike Persona 4 and 5, it doesn't have a definitive edition to port. Persona 4 has Persona 4 Golden and Persona 5 has Persona 5 Royal. But while Persona 3 has had 2 new editions since its original launch with Persona 3 FES and Portable, neither of them are a real definitive edition of the game. Both versions have unique content to that specific version, going from small quality of life features to game-changing mechanics, extra chapters or even an entirely new route. And because of this, I feel like Persona 3 still hasn't reached its full potential as a game. Because even if all these versions are great in their own way, all of them have something missing. Atlus worked around this problem by literally just ignoring it and porting the most recent version, which is Portable from 2009. But this does not change the fact that Persona 3 still does not have a definitive edition which includes the full Persona 3 experience, which is really just a shame. Because at its core, I genuinely believe that Persona 3 is the best Persona game Atlus has made so far. The story, characters, and just the game in general is incredible, but every release or new version it's gotten so far has had some problems that really hold it back. And these could easily be fixed, especially since the solution, which I'll cover later in the video, is literally just staring Atlus in the eyes. Of course, Portable is in no way a bad version of the game, because just like there is no best version of Persona 3, there's also no bad version of Persona 3. But the choice to port Portable has created a lot of discourse and confusion among the fanbase and the wider JRPG community. And understandably so, since a portable version of a game is always downgraded in a lot of ways. But as someone who absolutely loves Persona 3, I thought it would be fun to make a video going a bit more in depth about the situation, because there are probably a lot of people out there who want to know exactly what's going on with this game and what could be in store for its future. And to do that, this video will be structured in different parts, and I won't go into spoilers whatsoever. First, I'll be going over the current state of Persona 3, covering the 2 versions that we have right now, and see if we can find out why Atlus chose to port Portable. Then I'll talk about the potential future for Persona 3, a future which might never happen but one that it definitely deserves. I'll talk about what a new Persona 3 could look like, be it a simple remaster, a definitive edition, or even a full-on remake. So to start off, let's talk about the 2, or 3 if you want to include the original, main versions of Persona 3, which is Portable and FES. As I mentioned earlier, a lot of people are confused about Persona 3 Portable being the one to be ported. Especially the people who only recently got into the franchise through Persona 5, or maybe the people who haven't even gotten into the franchise yet, but are interested in it because of all the new announcements. And I fully get that confusion, since it's Persona 3 Portable. Surely the portable version of the game would be a downgrade to make it run on a portable system, right? I mean, yes and no. As I mentioned before, Portable is the latest version of Persona 3, which was released in 2009 for the PSP. FES, on the other hand, was released a year prior in 2008 for the PlayStation 2. Of course, there is also the original Persona 3, which was released in 2006, but the existence of FES and Portable kinda made that version irrelevant, since both versions simply improve and build upon the original, even if they do it in their own ways. Besides for these two main versions of the game, there are also some wacky side versions or spin-offs, I guess you could call them, like Persona 3 Social or Persona 3 Escape, which are Japan-only mobile games. So for obvious reasons I won't be talking about them anymore, I just thought it would be fun to at least give them a mention. But let's get back on track and talk about some of the differences between FES and Portable, so we get a better idea of both versions and why Atlus chose Portable. And then we can start talking about the new version of the game. For the sake of this video, I'm not going to list every single difference between these games though. Instead, I'll just highlight some of the biggest differences that make these games a different experience. Let's start with what in my opinion is the biggest difference, the female route. This is a new route that was added in Portable, and as the name suggests, this route has you playing as a female variant of the main protagonist. You can choose your route and protagonist at the beginning of the game. Of course, it's more than just a different sprite and a different character model. The female route has a new soundtrack and also different social links with different romance options. There's even a decision which only the female protagonist can make, and this changes a pretty big part of the main story. I won't be going into too many details about this for spoiler reasons of course, but it has to do with this guy. If you know, you know, and if you don't know, you'll find out if you play the game. Sadly, however, the female route is mostly seen as non-canon in the community, especially since Atlus rarely acknowledges the existence of the female protagonist. And if they do acknowledge her, it's really inconsistent. Just looking at the spin-off games, you have Persona 3 Dancing or Persona Q, where she literally does not exist, but in Persona Q2, the sequel to Persona Q, she's right there. And in sequel games like Persona 4 Arena and Persona 4 Arena Ultimax, which are canon sequels to Persona 3 and 4 by the way, the female protagonist just does not exist. And this weird situation is why most people just consider her to be non-canon, even if we all love her. But having this second route still adds a lot of replay value in my opinion, and it's just a great addition to the game. Another major win for Portable is the fact that, and I genuinely can't believe that FES doesn't have this, you can control your party members in combat. Yep, for some reason, in Persona 3 FES, and in the original for that matter, you cannot control your party members in combat. This is a feature that was only added in Portable and stayed a key feature afterwards, moving forward in Persona 4 and 5. So in this turn-based strategy game, you literally have 3 out of 4 characters acting on their own in battle, which sadly, but also understandably so, turns a lot of people away from playing FES. I am actually making this sound a bit worse than it actually is though. Thankfully, the game doesn't just make your party members do random actions. In both the original and in FES, you can assign tactics to each party member. You can assign them a support role for example, so their AI will focus on healing you or debuffing the enemy. Or you can assign them an assault role, so they will just attack the enemy in full force and so on. So while it's not terrible and it works, it's definitely worse than controlling the party members directly. We are talking about an AI system from the mid-2000s after all, so it's far from perfect. But looking at these two pretty major points with the combat and the female protagonist, Portable looks like the obvious way to go. But of course, that's not where the differences end, because if it did, I would not be making this video. If you just take a quick glance at some gameplay from FES and Portable, you will immediately notice a difference. Specifically if you look at the live sim gameplay. In FES you have 3D environments of the city where you can freely walk around and explore the area, or just talk to NPCs and do general Persona open world stuff. But in Portable these environments work very differently. Here you explore the city with a menu based system. This means that you can't just walk around in an environment, but instead you get a zoomed out camera perspective of the area that you are in, and you get a cursor to click on points of interest. The environment is filled with these points that you can then interact with. By selecting them, you can talk to NPCs, access the shops, etc. So all the live sim gameplay just happens through interacting with a menu. However, this is only done in the live sim sections of the game. When you're fighting through the dungeons, the game just goes back to normal with 3D characters walking around in a 3D environment. But since the gameplay is pretty evenly split between the daily life sections and the dungeon sections, the fact that the entire live sim gameplay is just a menu can really take a hit on your immersion and just your general enjoyment of the game. Yeah, as a gameplay system it works, and there's nothing fundamentally wrong here, but I feel like you can't deny that this is a massive downgrade from actual explorable areas. And downgrades like this is where this version of the game takes the biggest hits. Another example of this is the removal of all cutscenes. While FES has our beloved animated cutscenes, Portable just does not have these. I could explain this, but maybe it's better to just show it. So here's the opening cutscene of FES and Portable side by side.
Are you serious? You didn't know? You're an idiot. Yeah, I'm at the station right now.
Attention passengers. We sincerely apologize for any inconvenience caused by the delay. The next stop is Ewood.
So as you can see, the story events weren't changed at all, but Portable just uses stills of the cutscenes in combination with a visual novel style presentation with character portraits and a text box. In my opinion, this is an incredibly massive downgrade. FES is so cinematic and it sets the mood and the vibe perfectly, but Portable just focuses on showing the story. But the biggest thing that Portable removes by far has to be the answer. The answer is the sequel chapter to Persona 3, which unlocks after you beat the game, and it follows Aegis, one of the main characters from the base game. And it's pretty substantial, to be honest. Most people take around 30 hours to beat it according to how long to beat, and it adds a lot of story content, which is honestly really good, and it fills in some gaps from the main story, and it adds an entirely new dungeon. The answer is also just really important as a part of the Persona 3 story, since it is 100% canon, and the sequel games such as Persona 4 Arena call back to events that happened here. For some reason though, this chapter is only playable in Persona 3 FES. If I had to guess, they probably didn't include it in Portable, so they wouldn't have to remake it with a female version and to save disk space. But that's just a shame. Of course, you could just play Portable and watch the story on YouTube. But then again, you play the game because you want to play the game. Otherwise, you could just watch the entire story on YouTube. Something else that Portable does have going for it is the part-time job system. In FES you can't get a part-time job, so the only way to get money in that game is by playing through the dungeon and defeating enemies, which is just a lot more tedious. But with that, I think we discussed most differences between Portable and FES. Looking at this, I feel like you can already see why there is no definitive edition of Persona 3. When choosing which version you want to play, it's not just which version is the better game, but which version do I prefer? In which version do I have to sacrifice less? Do I prefer better daily life gameplay, anime cutscenes and a more complete story, but having worse combat and no female route option? Or would I rather have a female route, better combat but no cutscenes and a menu-based slice of life gameplay? Personally, I always recommend FES, because it just gives the better story and immersive experience, which is also why I play these games, to experience the story. But I know some people that play these games for the combat and for that reason refuse to play FES. Personally, I played FES first. I did play the game through emulation and I used a lot of save states, which definitely helped with some frustrations that the combat brings with it, especially in the final boss. But as someone who was planning on playing with a male protagonist anyway, I thought I would have to sacrifice less by playing this version of the game. On a quick side note, there are mods out there that add a controllable party member system into FES. So if you really can't live with the combat system and you want to play FES, that's there. But for the sake of this video, I'm not going to go into all the possibilities that mods can bring, since I just want to talk about the games as they were released. But while I do recommend FES, I can see why Atlus decided to port Portable instead. I don't think people would just accept the combat system in 2023 when the port is set to release. Especially since Portable is right there and the combat in that game is so much better. Plus of course it is the latest version, so re-releasing an older version now would kinda shine a bad light on Portable. Apparently the code of Persona 3 FES is also a mess, which makes porting it a lot harder. I'm not going to go into all the details about this because that would just drag this video out with boring code stuff, but I'll give you some examples. In FES you have a lot of bosses that have multiple phases, and these phases aren't just states of the same character model, they are literally duplicated character models, each with unique animations that the game switches between when the boss goes to its next phase. Because of this, there's a boss in the game that has 14 different character models. So knowing this, it's pretty self-explanatory why they chose to port Portable over FES. Porting FES would basically require them to clean up this mess, which is basically just remaking the game at this point. And yeah, while we do want them to remake the game, that's really unlikely to happen, or at least for this release. So now that we're done talking about the current state of Persona 3, let's talk about the potential future for Persona 3. Of course we know about the Portable port, and while it could just end there, they could also just go a step further into the direction of a remaster, or even go another step further in the direction of a remake. And in that case, they have a lot of options, and I do mean a lot, because these days the words remaster or remake just get thrown around a lot, and I feel like their meaning has kinda gotten lost. Just looking at a few recent examples, we've got stuff like Final Fantasy VII Crisis Core Reunion, which looks like a remake. People are calling it a remake, but Square Enix keeps saying that it's a remaster. And in definition, it is a remaster. It's true that it has new character models, new music, new combat system, new movement system, new environments, new voice acting, basically new everything. But it hasn't been rebuilt from the ground up. So yes, this is still a remaster, even if it's a really high quality, really high effort one. At least judging from the trailers that we've seen. And on the other side, with actual remakes, we have stuff like Demon's Souls or The Last of Us Part 1, which is a remake in the literal sense of the word. It has new character models, new movement system, new environments, etc., just like Crisis Core. But in these cases, the games were rebuilt from the ground up. Even if they used some old assets, like the animation timing for Demon's Souls or the motion capture work for The Last of Us. And you can definitely see the difference here. These games look and play like a new game from the year that they were released in. But that's nothing against Crisis Core. While we can't speak of the quality of that remaster, since the game hasn't been released yet at the time of making this video, it definitely looks amazing and it's a massive upgrade. I'm especially impressed how much better it looks than the original, considering that it's made to run on less powerful systems like the Nintendo Switch. But all of these examples that I just mentioned keep the main story 100% the same, which should be normal for a remake or remaster. But we also have the Final Fantasy VII Remake trilogy, which from the looks of it is basically just creating a whole new story while keeping the core of the original. It's true that we don't know exactly how far the story will deviate yet, since it is a remake trilogy and only the first part has been released so far, but some stuff has definitely changed already, especially near the end of that game. We'll just have to wait for Rebirth and Part 3 to see how that turns out though. But the visuals in this case are also massively upgraded, so much so that it's pretty hard to even compare it to the original Final Fantasy VII. But in my opinion, since the story is being changed, this would be more of a reimagining than a standard remake, even though the first game is literally called Remake. But I think that's just Nomura being Nomura, so we'll let him do whatever he wants, we'll just love it anyway. With what I just said though, I just want to make clear that I wasn't being negative about any of these games, by the way. I love every single game I just mentioned here. But while these examples were all fantastic, we also have the darker side of remasters, let's say, with stuff like the GTA trilogy. Those games are being called remasters or definitive editions, but in reality they're basically just a super low effort remaster, which are in ways worse than the original game. They've had super small quality of life changes, and yeah, they also changed the character models, but the new models literally look worse than the original ones. The only real upgrade I noticed while playing is stuff like the weapon wheel and the lighting while driving around, which looks pretty fine, I guess. So as you can see, a remaster, a remake, or even a reimagining can mean a lot of things these days. Getting back on Persona 3, however, I always saw as most likely that Atlus won't do anything more than just the ports that they've announced. They'll just port Persona 3 Portable, and that'll be it. A port, just like we've seen with Persona 4 Golden on Steam, which released 2 years ago. What is time even anymore? And while I may be sounding negative right now, this is already incredible. We've always wanted Persona 3 on modern consoles, and while I will be talking about the new version, and while yes, that would be better, a port is already fantastic. Personally, I'm just kinda sad that it's not getting a physical release because I like collecting my games, but I do understand why they chose not to do that. Like, just imagine a random person walking into their local game store and seeing this Persona 3 game for PS5, and then when they come home and boot it up, it just looks like this. So yeah, just a digital release at a lower price point is probably the best option for a port like this. I'm just glad that a lot of people are going to be able to experience Persona 3 now. Be it on Switch, PlayStation, Xbox or Steam, everyone is going to have a chance to play this incredible game. Interestingly enough, however, Atlus does these user surveys every now and then, and these surveys are definitely of interest here, because they often include questions like, what games do you want to see remade or re-released? And surprise surprise, the results revealed that almost everyone wants a Persona 3 remake the most. I was so happy to see that this was the highest voted game to get a remake, together with the Persona 2 games, which, yes, please remake them as well, or at least port them, Atlus, please. But what if they actually listened? And what if they actually made a new Persona 3? Because it's clear that they know that we all want it. And this survey really gave me hope. One option for this new Persona 3 would be kind of a mix between a remake and a remaster. So let's just call it the definitive edition. What this new Persona 3 would basically just be a mix between Portable and FES. We would have 3D environments of the city, we would have access to the sequel chapter, The Answer, and we would have an option to play as a female protagonist, with everything that adds. And of course it would have controllable party members in combat. This version wouldn't really have new content or overhauled mechanics, but it would literally just mix both versions of the game to create the definitive version finally. But while this is being thrown around a lot on the internet, it's definitely easier said than done. It would require a lot more work than just a normal remaster or re-release, since they can't really use any of the games as a base to build this definitive edition with. If they use FES as a base, they would have to add party member controls, they would have to add the female route, they would have to add stuff like the part-time job mechanic, make new cutscenes for the female protagonist, and so much more. And then on the other hand, we have the option of using Persona 3 Portable as a base. And here, they would have to remake basically everything that isn't the dungeon gameplay to accommodate for the 3D environments. So while it may sound easy to just mix Portable and FES, it's definitely a massive undertaking that would come closer to remaking the game than just remastering it. But let's just entertain this idea a bit longer. Because even if it's a massive undertaking, Atlus knows that this is what we all want, and it'll definitely make money since they have the survey results saying that yes, we will buy something like this. So there's a chance of this becoming a reality. And while the game mechanics in this situation would be a lot of work, the visuals are kind of a different story, especially since we are talking about something closer to a remaster than a remake, like as I said, a definitive edition. So because of that, I don't think that the visuals need that big of an upgrade. Literally all this version needs to do is eliminate the entire should I play Portable or should I play FES debate. So just clean up some environments, slap some HD textures in there, and boom, you got yourself a pretty good looking Persona 3 definitive edition. Kinda like what they did with the Persona 4 Golden Steam port. The only thing that I could see causing problems on the visual side is the cutscenes. They could either go the Portable route of having visual novel style cutscenes, or they could include the animated cutscenes from FES. But since those are originally from FES, there won't be any cutscenes for the female route, which is where these problems originate. There are also 4 Persona 3 movies out there, which cover most of the plot of the game, and these movie scenes could also be used as cutscenes, but once again, the movies only cover the male route. So we have the exact same problem here. Keeping all this in mind, and keeping in mind that this isn't a complete remake, I would say just use the visual novel style cutscenes. They might not be optimal, but they do convey the storyline perfectly fine, and the gameplay would be the major focus of this release. Instead of using stills from the FES cutscenes, however, it would be cool if they used stills from the movies instead. This way it would look better visually, but they can also avoid the problem of showing the protagonist, like they do in Portable. So now we basically have our definitive edition. We have the environments in the sequel chapter from FES, mixed together with the combat and the female protagonist from Portable. We even have cutscenes that look a little bit better, since they would be using the movie stills. In concept, this would be the Persona 3 that we've all been asking for, a simple mix of Portable and FES. I genuinely don't know if Atlus would do something like this though. A project like this would take up a lot of their time and budget, a lot more than just a standard port. And if they're putting in all this time and effort, why wouldn't they just go a step further? Because it is the anniversary of the series, and while the announcements haven't been the best, they have said that they have a lot more in store for the future of the franchise, but that they just weren't ready to reveal it yet. So why don't we take this concept a step further as well? What if Atlus actually does bring Persona 3 back in a bigger way? What would a Persona 3 remake look like? Since the definitive edition would mostly focus on bringing together both versions and improving the gameplay, this remake could be its own thing entirely. Not just taking stuff from FES or from Portable, but just making a completely new Persona 3. I'm talking about Persona 3 as if it was made today, as if it wasn't just a re-release of a previous entry, but the next and newest entry, in the way that Final Fantasy VII Remake isn't just a re-release, but a part of the franchise's future. The Persona 3 Remake could improve on everything that the original had, while still keeping the essence and the core intact, looking visually as good as Persona 5 does, if not better, Because Persona 5 is still natively a PlayStation 3 game, and this would be a PlayStation 4 or even PlayStation 5 game. Besides for the visuals, the gameplay mechanics could also be overhauled with everything that they learned from Persona 4 and 5. Because while I absolutely adore this game, it was the first time that Atlus made a game like this, and that caused some problems, I guess you could say, in the way that some game mechanics work, especially the new ones like the social links. One thing that I do want to clarify first is that I don't want them to change the core or the story of Persona 3 in any way for this remake. This is a new Persona 3, but it is still Persona 3. But as I said before, there is some stuff in Persona 3 that could use some changes, because otherwise we wouldn't be talking about this. Like the social links, for example. For those of you who don't know what social links are, they basically are hangout events that you can have with side characters in the Persona game. Each of these characters then has a level, which can be increased by completing these events. So by hanging out with these characters, your social link level can increase. And in return, you get stuff like new skills. So they're just a cool way to get closer to the characters. But don't get me wrong, the thing that holds these social links back aren't the stories that they tell at all. More so, it's the gameplay mechanics behind them, or the way that they're implemented here. You see, social links in Persona 3 aren't the same as they are in Persona 4 or 5. Or at least in the case of the male protagonist. The biggest difference is how the social links work with your party members. Male party members just don't have social links. Rather, your party just has one big social link that progresses with the story. If you've played Persona 4, this may sound familiar, it's like the investigation team social link, or Morgana social link in Persona 5. But in this game, the male party members don't have their own individual social link outside of this. I do get why they did it though. The relationship that the main character has with his party members is a lot more complex here than in the other games. However, I do think that they could add something here. Maybe not a normal social link like you have with all the other characters, but something more like the Akechi social link in Persona 5. If you haven't played Persona 5 Royal, in this social link you're not really best friends with each other, but you hang out anyway, especially to talk about the recent events that have been happening in the story. But about the Persona 3 characters, Atlus even knows how to make a social link for them, because in Portable, in the female route, they all have one. Junpei, Akihiko, Ken, all of them have social links, but as I said, only for the female protagonist. They just haven't made one for the male route yet. And that's a real shame, but the new Persona 3 version could easily fix this and create new social links between the protagonist and these characters. Making these social links a bit different from their female counterpart immediately gives you more incentive to play the game again with the other protagonists. When playing as a male protagonist, you can however hang out with all your female party members, because in both the female and male routes they have their own social link. But when playing as the male protagonist, there's a catch here, because you can only have romantic social links with them. This means that if you're hanging out with, let's say, Yukari or with Fuka, you automatically start romancing them once your social link is high enough. So if you want to romance Mitsuru, let's say, you can't hang out with Yukari or Fuka anymore once your social link with her reaches a certain level. Because if you do that, you would be cheating on Mitsuru, which actually affects your social link with Yukari, Fuka, Mitsuru, every other female character in the game. So stuff like this actually has some pretty big consequences. I'll talk more about these consequences and how it affects their social links later, but for now I just think it's a real shame that there's no friendship route for any of the female side characters, at least if you're playing as the male protagonist. I guess I can kinda see where they're coming from, because you get close to them in the main story, so hanging out with them outside of that would be going a step further into the romantic direction then, I guess. But as we've seen in Persona 4 and 5, romancing does not have to be the only option, and it can be done a lot better. In my Persona 5 playthrough, for example, I was romancing Makoto, Best Girl, but at the same time I was leveling my social links with An, Haru, or Kasumi, creating a real bond with them and becoming best friends. The game wouldn't just default me to romancing every single female character, and in return cheating on all of them. In 5 you can of course romance multiple characters, but outside of that one Valentine scene, it doesn't have any consequences at all. And to be precise, in Persona 3 you can also romance everyone, But to do that, you would have to max out your social links one by one, because once a social link is maxed out, it won't get affected by you cheating on them or by you just hanging out with someone else. Obviously, and thankfully, not every social link is a romance in Persona 3 though. There are some social links that are just platonic. And these social links, as well as the romantic ones, are among my favorites in the entire series. We've got some bangers like Akinari or Tanaka, who you might recognize if you played Persona 4 or 5, and your Velvet attendant, Elizabeth, who is also the best Velvet attendant in the entire series. Or your other Velvet attendant, Theodore, if you're playing Portable, because there you can choose your Velvet attendant. But while I'm talking about the Velvet attendants, I do want them to change something about how their social link works. Let's say that you chose Elizabeth, for example. Right now, she's not really a social link, but more of a quest giver of sorts, and some of her quests are just, come vibe with me in this location. These vibe quests are basically the same as social link events though, which is why everyone just treats her as a social link even though in theory she's not a social link. How this works is she gives you the quest to hang out with her, and then you have a deadline to complete this event. But here's the catch. The deadline isn't just for hanging out with her. You also need to go back to her the next day that you can, to tell her that you hung out with her. Only then, at that moment, the quest will be marked completed, and the next vibe quest will unlock, so you can hang out with her again in a new location to see her next event. So she's basically a timed side quest social link, I guess you could say. But I really want them to change this, because in my playthrough I messed this up. And after hanging out with her the second time, I forgot to talk to her afterwards. Because of this, I missed the deadline, and I never got another vibe quest, so I only got to hang out with my Queen Link 2 times. I know that this is completely my fault, but I'll never ever not be annoyed by the fact that I messed that up. And now I'm just being a little bitch about it on the internet, but that's what I do. And this is my channel, so I do it on here. But Atlas, please change this. I wanna hang out with her more, and not have this weird deadline thing, where you need to say to her, yo, remember I hung out with you yesterday, why don't we mark that completed? Why doesn't it just complete when you hang out with her? But I digress. While I may have sounded really negative about the social links, that's because I really love the cast of Persona 3. All the social links here are really interesting. Even if the female ones all end up in a romance, the story that they tell is really good. Which is exactly why I would love to experience them without going into the direction of a romantic plotline. Because when I play these games, I get really immersed in them, and I'm role-playing, so I don't want to cheat on every girl that I hang out with. I'm really happy that Atlas changed how this worked for future titles. But there's also another thing about social links that was changed as the series evolved. Namely, the reverse social link mechanic. But unlike the rest of the social link system, this one didn't really evolve in a good way. Rather, it was just pushed to the background in Persona 4, and in Persona 5 they completely removed it. Personally, I really miss this system. While it wasn't perfect at all in 3, it was a really good concept, and it could work extremely well if they build upon it and evolved it. This system was all about creating consequences for your actions within the social links, these consequences being that your social links can reverse. What this means is that you could get into a fight with your friends, and you can't continue the social link until you resolve the conflict. These conflicts can happen in a few ways. For example, if you cheat on them romantically, or if you choose an obviously wrong dialogue option, which will piss that person off. In FES, they even go a step further, and social links can break. But this only happens if you see that the social link has reversed, and you just keep ignoring them without reconciling with them in time. If you do that, their social link will just break or end. This last part was already removed in Persona 3 Portable though, and I fully understand why they took out the break part, because sometimes you just prioritize one social link over the other, and having a social link completely break then is just kinda sad. But if you haven't played the game, what I've just been explaining might have been a little bit confusing for you. So let me just give you an example of a personal experience that I had with this system while playing the game. When I was playing Persona 3 for the first time with Persona 3 FES, I had no idea that this system was a thing. But I also had no idea that the game wouldn't let you choose between a romantic or a friendly connection. So I was just hanging out with the strength social link in this game, Yuko. I never had any intention of dating her though, since it was just early game and I was just building up some random social links as you do in this game. But then I noticed that the social link was going in a romantic direction without me even making that choice. So I just did some research and I found out that, yeah, you can't make that decision in this game. So I thought, alright, sure, this is the first time that Persona is doing the social link system, so it has some flaws. Guess I'll just stop hanging out with her, because I already have some other characters that I like more than her. So I did just that, I stopped hanging out with her and I focused on other social links instead. During this period, Yuko would often call my character to hang out together on free days, but I just kept refusing. Little did I know back then. And of course, during this time, as I said, I was focusing on other characters. And by the time that my social link with Fuka reached the romantic level, I noticed that Yuko stopped asking to hang out, and that her social link had in fact reversed. I'm not sure if the cause of the reversal is refusing all her calls, or if it was the fact that I'm dating Fuka, but after some research, I found out that both could have been the cause. And honestly, while it was flawed, I thought that the system was incredible. Of course, the character would get angry. I literally started dating her, only to then ghost her, I guess, and cheat on her with Fuka. There are still ways to avoid this from happening. Like I mentioned earlier, social links that are maxed out cannot be reversed. But I genuinely think that this is a really good way to add some more weight to the social link system. Even if it's just a small thing, it already bothered me at times when I was playing my first Persona game, Persona 5 for the first time, that you can just hang out with, let's say, Hifumi, bring her to social link level 3 or 4 within the first arc or the first month of the game. Then I could completely ignore her for the rest of the game, and in the last arc I could technically go back to her, which would be a year later in game time, and she'll just act like we've been hanging out every week since we first met. And yeah, as I said, this is a really small thing, but it's just a really cool way to add some more character, to more personality, and some more weight to this entire system, which is a really big part of the Persona franchise. So I would love to see this system again and refined in the Persona 3 remake, or even in the future in general with Persona 6. Especially now that there are so many more ways to hang out with your friends that were introduced in the later games by inviting a group of characters to a bar or something. Because this system could be so much more than just Yuko being angry at me because I cheated on her. But instead of evolving it, they really pushed it in the background in Persona 4. So much so that I didn't even know it was there until I started working on this video. And in Persona 5, it's just gone. Which is actually part of the reason of why I want a Persona 3 remake. If the series would just continue now, we would just have Persona 6, Persona 7, I don't know how long the series is gonna go, but there's no way that they would just randomly decide to bring this system back. But if Atlus decides to go back to Persona 3 and make that their next big title of the franchise, they would have to include the reverse social link system in some way, because it's part of the core systems of the game. So this would force them basically to take another look at the system, refine it, and if people then like it, maybe they can take it to the future with Persona 6 or 7, as I said before. And even if they don't completely overhaul the system in a remake, I feel like it would already be massively improved by just giving you the choice to romance a character or not. Because as it stands right now, the system is really tedious, and I understand why they cut it, but in concept, there is something here, and I just keep thinking about how this system could become such a cool thing for the future. But as I said, what if they just keep the system the same, but add a choice for romancing a character or not? That way, it would only activate if you're actively cheating on the character you are romancing, which would make a harem route harder, but not impossible, since you can always reconcile with them or max out the social links one by one. Also with non-romanceable characters, you could keep the system where you can choose a wrong dialogue option, which will have the consequences of the social link reversing. These answers would of course have to be blatantly wrong though, as they are right now in the game, so you can't just accidentally pick them. But maybe on a replay, who knows? What if you see your least favorite character and you just kinda wanna piss them off? Or they can use the system where you would have to hang out with your social links more regularly, especially if you're still at a lower level with them. Unless of course you've maxed out your social link with them, but at that point I don't really see why you would still be hanging out with them, unless you literally have nothing else to do in the game. But you do you, if you wanna hang out with your maxed social links, why not? But as you can see, this system has so much potential, and stuff like this would add an extra layer of depth to not only the gameplay systems, but also the characters themselves. But again, I really want to clarify that I do not want them to touch the story of these social links, only expand upon them or add ones for the characters that didn't have any. I also wouldn't touch anything about the story of Persona 3 itself, because as I've said many times before, it is in my opinion the best story in the entire franchise, so I do not want them to touch this at all. Maybe they can extend it in some ways, or add some small scenes here and there to flesh out the characters, the story, but nothing major needs to be done here at all. So now that we're done talking about the story and the social links and that entire part of the game, let's talk about the gameplay for a bit. And the gameplay of this remake would definitely be the easiest to imagine, especially since the combat didn't change that much from Persona 3 Portable through to Persona 4 all the way to Persona 5 Royal, comparable to the definitive edition that I talked about earlier. This remake would just ditch the FES combat and go straight for the combat of Portable, and going a step further in the way of modernizing it, including elements from the newer game's combat system, even if they were just small additions, because small tweaks can really go a long way into making a game feel a lot more modern. We just really don't want this game to look like it belongs on the PS5, while it still plays like it belongs on the PS2 or the PSP for that matter. Outside of the combat, the thing that I really want to see improved on the gameplay side is the open world life sim gameplay. In Persona 3, you of course have multiple areas that you can explore. All of these are accessible from the world map where you can select where you want to go. But Persona 5 really showed me how much they can improve the exploration in a Persona game. Each area in Persona 5 is connected and you can walk everywhere you want. Of course you can also quick travel with the map system, but just being able to walk everywhere, even if sometimes you have to use public transport, has a certain charm to it. Of course, Persona 3 and 4 also have the thing that you can walk everywhere, but Persona 5 does it differently. In Persona 3 or 4, if you walk up to the edge of an area, the map just pops up, and you can select any other area on the map and just instantly be taken there. But in Persona 5, they really improved upon it by if you walk to the edge of an area, the game just automatically brings you to the area connecting to the area that you were in first. So everything is connected organically, and if you press the map button, you can teleport wherever you want. But I always keep thinking about the first time in Persona 5 that you had to walk to school. I just know that I was endlessly walking around in that train station that looked like a maze, just looking for the way to go, how to get to the correct train. And thinking back to that moment in the game, it's so cool to see how far you've come once you reach the endgame. Because at that point, you're so connected to the city, and you know the city layout, like the inside of your pocket. You don't even have to look at your map anymore. I would be able to walk anywhere in that game. And I would love to see something like this in a Persona 3 remake. Just let me walk to the train station, let me walk to school, let me walk to the dormitory. But keep the map of course, so we can quick travel. Just give the player the choice. Do you want to walk everywhere, or do you just want to press a button and be taken there instantly? The only real change besides that I can think of is how the camera would work. In the original Persona 3, you have a very zoomed out camera perspective, and I know that I'm comparing everything to Persona 5, but the camera in Persona 5 is a real improvement on this, and it would be so cool if we could see something like that. at least for interior areas like the dorm or the school. It would just add another layer of immersion, because in my opinion it's a lot more immersive to have an over-the-shoulder camera shot instead of the more zoomed out perspective. And it's just so much cooler to see the city and all these locations in that way, instead of just being zoomed out and having a bigger overview. Other systems like the part-time job system should definitely be included here as well. This kinda goes without saying though, since Portable already included this system. Another thing that they could flesh out is the school part of the game. Just like in the other Persona games, in Persona 3 you need to take part in exams and study for them, but actually participating in the exams by making the player answer questions was only first introduced in Persona 4 Golden. And I really love this stuff. It adds an entirely new layer to that part of the game, because you actually need to pay attention to the classes now. Even if they add the online feature to check what other players answered, I still think it's a pretty neat mechanic that's worth including in this remake. I honestly feel like that would already be enough on the gameplay side. It might not sound like much, but changes like this will do so much to make the game feel more modern while still being Persona 3 at its core. And if we look back at the original Persona 3, you can definitely see how the gameplay mechanics here served as the base for the rest of the franchise to build on. And by consequence, this means that a lot of the mechanics have been fleshed out as the series continued. So a lot of the changes that I talked about would simply be that, fleshing them out and adding more layers to it to bring it up to standards with the newer games in the franchise. But besides for the social links and the gameplay mechanics, the franchise also really evolved the way it handles the level design of the dungeons in specific. And that's what I want to talk about next, the dungeon level design in the Persona games. So let's talk a bit about Tartarus. For those who have yet to play Persona 3 and don't know what I'm talking about, first off, thanks for watching the video up to this point, I hope you're having a good time, but let me just explain the basics of what Tartarus is. Simply put, Tartarus is the dungeon or the metaverse setting of Persona 3. If you played the other Persona games, just think the TV world from Persona 4 or the palaces from Persona 5. But instead of being different instances like in later games, Tartarus is one continuous dungeon, from start to finish. So I guess a better comparison from within the franchise would be Mementos. But for those who played the original Persona 5, don't worry, Tartarus has more than one OST. However, it is a lot longer, and with that I mean 264 floors. But despite what you might be thinking, the length of Tartarus isn't really the problem here. The problem lies more in that it's basically just 264 floors that have been procedurally generated. They all look the same, they all feel the same, they're all structured the same. Sometimes the color does change, and sometimes the song changes. Sometimes there was a boss or a treasure chest, but that doesn't change the fact that this is just one massive dungeon made out of 264 floors that all look and feel the same. It's also just not that pleasant to look at because of the way that it's structured. It's just made out of different squares that are procedurally stitched together. On screen right now there's some gameplay showing this to clarify what I mean. And I understand why they went with this way of creating Tartarus, because manually creating 264 floors sounds like hell, but at the same time it's just not very nice to look at or to explore for that matter. A lot of the time that I was navigating through it, I was simply just staring at a minimap instead of looking at the actual game, unless I heard a shadow or something, which is the last thing you want. And there are definitely ways to improve on Tartarus while keeping the vibe and the core intact. They can even keep it procedural, since technology has improved so much, a procedural dungeon can look pretty good nowadays and be fun to explore even. Changing the design up a bit, adding unique floors, stuff like that can go a long way of making Tartarus more fun and less of a tedious experience. They could even add stuff like fake walls. That way you can't just stare at your minimap 24/7, but you actually need to look at the game you're playing. Plus Fuka as your navigator can have more to do, since she can call out where a fake wall might be or what's behind said wall. Since the floors are also grouped together and divided into different blocks, maybe it would be cool to connect each floor within a block seamlessly without loading screens. Modern hardware should definitely be able to handle that, and it keeps the flow of the exploration going. Plus, it also adds so many new possibilities for exploration, like adding multiple ways or routes to go up. And some of these ways could then end up being a dead end, but they should always have some reason for you to go there though, like a special treasure or maybe a hidden boss. And Fuka the Navigator should always warn you if a staircase leads to a dead end. That way the player can choose, do I wanna explore this dead end and see what treasure lies ahead? Or do I just wanna go through Tartarus quickly, maybe you're on a replay, and you just wanna progress? You could even have staircases in the game that let you skip a floor. Let's say, for example, that one of the ways to go up is guarded by a stronger enemy. But once you beat it, you can go from floor 2 immediately up to floor 4 or 5 even. That way you have a high risk, high reward kind of thing going on. And if you want to take inspiration from the newer titles, they could add stuff like flu season or a heatwave, which could give Tartarus some kind of special condition like more XP, better drops, weakened enemies, maybe stronger enemies, who knows? There are so many possibilities here, and these are just some of the ideas that I came up with while writing this video. If you have any ideas of how to improve Tartarus, I would love to hear them as well, especially since the dungeon gameplay has improved so much in the more recent titles. Even the jump between the original Persona 5 and Persona 5 Royal was incredible. Something else that I think we can expect to see in a remake is just some general quality of life changes. Just some small tweaks that make the game feel more like the next Persona game instead of just another remaster or another re-release. Stuff like the Persona Compendium could always use an update, adding new demons or just modernizing the UI a bit to make the fusing easier to use. They could also add some other things in the way of extra content. I'm thinking stuff like special battles against the other Persona or SMT protagonists, in the way that you can fight the Persona 4 and even the Persona 3 protagonist in Persona 5. Knowing Atlus though, sadly these fights would be like some overpriced day 1 DLC, but you know, it's a cool feature that I would still like to see added. And if possible, just release it with the game, don't put it into the game, and then take it out and sell it separately as Day 1 DLC. But besides that, they can add other stuff like a New Game Plus mode, so you can play as the other protagonist while keeping your social skills like your knowledge level, and keeping your compendium. That would make it so much more accessible and easier to play the game again in another route without having to grind everything up again. But now that we know how this remake will be structured and how it will play, let's talk about how it would look. And we actually have a pretty good idea of how a Persona 3 remake could look. Because when I say that people want a remake, I really mean it. So much so that we have so many fan-made screenshots or mock-ups or edits, you name it, of what this remake could look like. There's honestly not too much to say about this. I feel like everyone has a pretty good image in their minds of what this would look like. The easiest way to describe it would be Persona 5 with its Persona 3. Or if we take a step away from Persona 5 comparisons, we can also compare it to the other Atlus games that recently released, like Soul Hackers 2 or SMT5. We even have new modern character models for most of the main cast of Persona 3, thanks to Persona 3 Dancing in Moonlight. Of course, the character models for the remake wouldn't look exactly the same, because it's running in a different engine and all of that stuff, but it does give us a pretty good idea of what these characters would look like in HD for the new generation. For the male main protagonist though, we do have a basically 100% accurate new character model, thanks to the DLC that I mentioned earlier in Persona 5, in which you fight the protagonist of Persona 3. Sadly though, and in classic Atlus fashion, only the male protagonist is available to fight in Persona 5, so we don't really know what the female main protagonist would look like. Even for the dancing game she doesn't have a model, but there are a lot of fan mock-ups, which can look pretty accurate. Talking about Persona 3 dancing though, there's something I see a lot of people bring up every time there's talk about the Persona 3 remake, and that's stuff like, they don't even need to remake the environments, because they literally have the Persona 3 dancing environments. Or something else that I hear a lot is like, Persona 3 dancing is basically foreshadowing and confirmation that a remake is already confirmed, because there's no way that they would remake all of these environments just for a dancing game. They were just making the environments for a remake and then decided, fuck it, let's make a dancing game and let's use the assets in that. But that's just not how this stuff works. There's no way that they'll be able to use the dancing environments and character models as actually usable assets in a Persona 3 remake. Because that's just not what they were made for. The environments were made to be good looking backdrops, to be seen from only a few angles, not for playable characters to walk around in or to explore. And yes, making these environments for the dancing game definitely took a lot of work. But that's what they are. They are environments made for the dancing game. This is not Atlus going, we're making a remake anyway, so let's use these assets to make a dancing game. Plus, a remake would be so much more than these environments. It's true that they work as a nice reference, and that they give us a good idea of what a Persona 3 remake could look like, but it's pointless to look at Persona 3 dancing and say, oh, they're already halfway done. Or something like that, which is another thing that I keep hearing a lot. When talking about visuals though, I can't not mention the cutscenes. Since this would be a complete remake, of course this includes remaking the animated cutscenes. It's really hard to speculate on how these would look though, especially since we have no idea which animation studio they would go for. Atlus seems to work with different studios for each project. Persona 5 for example had cutscenes made by Production IG, which is mostly known for animating stuff like Ghost in the Shell, Fooly Cooly or Psycho-Pass. Persona 4's cutscenes on the other hand were made by A1 Pictures, which recently produced anime like Love is War or The Promised Neverland. And then the original Persona 3 used a different studio once again. All of these games had amazing looking cutscenes though, but I also noticed that each game had better looking cutscenes than the one that came before. So whoever they choose, I'm sure that the cutscenes of this remake would be perfect. But now that we talked about how the game would be structured, how it would play and how it looks, I feel like we about covered it for this remake. I absolutely have no idea what the future holds for Persona 3, but either way, I'm already happy that we're gonna be able to play Persona 3 Portable on modern consoles soon. There are some rumors going around online about a possible remake, but these are still rumors after all and should in no way be taken as pure confirmation. This remake is something a lot of people want, and it's also something that a lot of people have wanted for a really, really long time. So fake rumors like this pop up all the time, especially nowadays, where everyone can just make a Reddit or a 4chan account, call themselves something like the Persona Insider, and make a post about how their uncle works at Atlus and he's personally working on a Persona 3 remake. So I didn't know this when I was originally recording my video, but after some more research now that I'm editing, it seems like there's a pretty reliable leak or rumor out there about a possible Persona 3 remake. I will have this rumor linked in the description, so you can check it out for yourself, but personally I'm not gonna take this as confirmation. As I said, people have wanted a Persona 3 remake for literally forever now, and the source also didn't really provide any proof besides for his pretty good track record. But just in case, I'm keeping my expectations low to avoid disappointment, but as I said, I will have the source linked in the description, so you can check it out for yourself. Outside of all of these rumors though, I do think that the chances of Persona 3 getting a remake is pretty big. Yeah, there might be some copium in that statement, but looking at the survey results, I think there's a chance. Especially since it does look like Atlus is taking these survey results into account. Just recently, we've had a remaster for an Atlus game which had been massively requested by fans as well, that being SMT3 Nocturne, which got remastered for PC, PS4 and even a Nintendo Switch. And besides for the compressed audio, this remaster was really good. A lot of fans, including me, really enjoyed this. And just look at all the Persona ports. In a way, I even feel like the Persona 3 port is just something to avoid backlash while they keep working on the remake. Because just imagine the state of the internet if they ported Persona 4, Persona 5, even Persona 4 Arena Ultimax, but not port Persona 3. Plus, it could introduce some people to the world of Persona 3. And the sales of these ports could get them some extra cash to put into the remake, just like the sales of Persona 4 Golden on Steam made them port the other games now. But in the end, we never know what Atlus is going to end up doing, because Atlus is still Atlus. But I'm sure that if they do end up remaking Persona 3, it would be incredible, because while Atlus makes some really weird business decisions, and while they have absolutely horrible DLC practices, in the end, if they make a game, it's always incredible. Atlus also just knows that every Persona fan wants this to become a reality, just like everyone kept asking for Persona on Switch. And you know what? If that can happen, maybe, just maybe, there's a chance that we will see Persona 3 again in the future. If you made it this far into the video, I just want to say thank you so much. This is just a little unscripted thing at the end of my video, because I really just want to say thank you. I've been wanting to make this video for years, or just making videos in general, and only recently I finally decided to go for it, and here I am now with my first video. I know it's not perfect, but I'm pretty happy with how it turned out, considering my current mic quality and everything else really. I'll probably make more videos in the future because I had a lot of fun doing this, so why not subscribe or leave a like on the video. If you wanna hear more from me though, I do have a Twitter account on which I'm way too active, and I just tweet about random things happening, random games that I'm playing, random things that I'm watching or reading, so give that a follow, it's in the description below. And with that, this is the end of the video. So once again, thank you so much, and hopefully until next time.